Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. We cover a lot of ground this week. For one thing, we talk about what you do when your to-do list seems endless, you're already working 24/7, and you just can't get ahead. For another, what do you do when employees decide they want to work remotely from random parts of the country? Does that work? Is it a bureaucratic nightmare? And we discuss several big interrelated issues that Laura Zander is confronting. Her co-founder and husband, Doug, is ready to step back from the business. That's a little tricky because the company operates off a 19-year-old platform that Doug built, and only he knows how to make it work. Laura and Doug have been trying to hire tech people for Doug to train, but they've been through 15 people in 10 years, and they know they're doing something wrong. Do they need to hire a recruiter? Is it time to junk the platform and go with Shopify? If they do that, will they forfeit 19 years of SEO value? All of which has left Laura feeling trapped. That's this cage that we're in, she tells us. What the hell do you do? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which collects the most important news of the day for business owners in one place, and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes. This week's lineup features Karen Clark-Cole, who is CEO of Blink, a user experience research and design firm in Seattle. William Vanderbloemen, who is CEO of Vanderbloemen Search Group, a recruiting firm based in Houston that works with churches and other faith-based organizations. And Laura Zander, who is CEO of Jimmy Bean's Wool, a digital yarn store that is based in Reno, Nevada, and also owns a wholesale supplier, Madelinetosh, in Fort Worth, Texas. The episode is titled, How Do We Get Out of This Cage? Before we get started, one of the recurring themes of this podcast is that marketing is hard for smaller businesses. One reason it's hard is that we are all besieged by self-appointed digital marketing gurus who overwhelm us with outlandish promises. On the other hand, there's Steve Krull, co-founder of Be Found Online. A loyal listener to the 21 Hats podcast, Steve understands the business owners who listen to this podcast because he is one. He knows his stuff, but he's also a real person who you can have a real conversation with. And if you tell him I sent you, you can get a free consultation with Steve himself. Just shoot him an email at steve@befoundonline.com to schedule your talk. That's steve@befoundonline.com. Now on to the show. Welcome, Karen, William, and Laura. Laura, I'd like to start with you. I understand you have an important job opening. If I'm not mistaken, you're looking to replace your husband.
Yeah, I am. God, if there's a rich single man out there that would like an 11-year-old kid.
William, in your experience, how long does a husband search usually take?
Well, if you're willing to go the mail order route, we can get done pretty quick.
Perfect.
In all seriousness, your husband is your co-founder and I guess kind of the chief technology officer at Jimmy Bean's Wool. Is that right?
Yeah, he's the everything technology officer. But yes. So he has built, we've been in business 19 years. He started full-time 17 years ago, and he has built pretty much every piece of software that we use. So
from scratch, Laura?
From scratch.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So it's all zeros and ones. It's all like ASP.NET, JavaScript, VB. So, we have.
I just have to ask: are there no systems out there you could have used? You had to make them from
not
scratch?
19 years ago. No.
Oh wow.
No, and that was actually our big, huge competitive advantage is that nobody had. I mean, we probably could have spent $200,000 at the time. I mean, there was no Shopify. I mean, this was, we started years before Facebook started.
And also, you guys were both coders who made your living doing this.
Yes. Yeah. So we started it with an inventory management system that linked to a website, which was the e-commerce. Plus we had a point of sale system because we had a retail store. So we had this platform that Doug built, and then just expanded it. And you couldn't buy, we're in the yarn industry. And so we have all these interesting little things. It's not apparel where you sell one t-shirt in one size. You sell 2 hanks of yarn if somebody's going to make a scarf. You sell 3 hanks of the same color if somebody's going to make this. You sell blah, blah, blah. And then there are dye lots. So there are some complexities inherent to the industry that we're in that make it so that you can't just buy off-the-shelf software. Or you could, and then you could customize it, and that's something that we need to think about. But so now we have this, 19-year-old legacy system that Doug has built, added on to. He's invented some things, if you will, before things were available or readily available, like subscriptions. Before, I don't know what that subscription platform is, but he built a subscription platform for us before you could go buy one somewhere so that we could run subscriptions. So all of that said, he has built it. He maintains it. He maintains AWS for us. He maintains our phone system. He has 2 college-aged women that help him, and that he is training and teaching. We've run through over the last 10 years, I guess, maybe 12 years. We've tried hiring college students. We've tried hiring $150,000 a year people from Stanford. We've tried everything in between. We've probably hired 15 people over the last 10 years.
Wow.
Yes. So,
all to try to replace Doug or to do different things?
Well, we would, in an ideal world, he's a bright guy, and he's a creative, like he designs our house. He's an architect. He was a technical architect in the Bay Area before we started this. So in an ideal world, he would have a team underneath him with somebody that managed the team, and he could do the new creations, and he could create new technologies. That's what he's, uniquely talented at. But, or he could just walk away. I mean, if we found somebody to replace him today, he would walk away. He'd get on his mountain bike and ride into the sunset, very happily.
I think you told us previously that his dream is to be a house husband.
He wanted to be, his dream his whole life was to be a stay-at-home dad with no kids. And then I got pregnant, so we had the kid. But so one of our employees at one point put it described it very well, and that Doug has built a cage around himself, and we need to figure out how to get him out of that cage, because the system can't survive without him.
What's gone wrong with those 15 hires? Is there a common thread?
That's a great question. And I wish that I understood. It's a really great question. I don't know if it's our expectations. I don't know if it's, obviously it's that we didn't hire well. That's a big part of it. I do get feedback. Doug is really
Are all of them no longer with you? Laura, sorry to interrupt.
We have 2 right now. So he did for a couple of years. He had a team of 2 women that worked for him that he trained from the ground up, and they were a magical duo. They worked really, really well together. And the one woman, she was a college student, could have replaced him at some point, but she wanted to go to a bigger company. So she left after a couple years and she went to, Hamilton Robotics or someplace like that. She wanted to work on spaceships. So there's that. I think part of it is us just not hiring very well, probably not training or not communicating. I don't know. I mean, the feedback I'm getting is that he's extremely, extremely patient and extremely good at teaching people. But what happens is when he hires somebody that's $100,000 or $150,000, he has really high expectations and gets frustrated really easily when those expectations are not met. So, we hired a guy that had been a CTO or a director of engineering at a local Reno company. And he came in and the guy made mistakes all over the place. And Doug just has no tolerance for that. I mean, he's a very good programmer. So the guy made mistakes, wouldn't own up to them, didn't have the skill set that we thought he had. And that's why, again, I think it's part of it is the hiring and the expectations.
So what approach are you taking now? What exactly are you looking for, and how are you trying to find it?
I am a little paralyzed right this second. I have so much on my plate with the Texas business and everything else and trying to get that going that I've actually just been I've been ruminating on it for the last couple of weeks.
But even then, I mean, William, tell me if I'm totally wrong here, but even then you find somebody and it's not guaranteed they're going to work out.
Exactly.
Well, if you hire the right search firm, they guarantee their work for at least a year, if not two.
Yeah.
So, Laura, have you tried try before you buy? So we've done this in the past with 3 of our current C-level positions. One of them was had a consulting firm that we worked with for several years, and then actually bought them so that she could come in-house. Another one was that was our chief culture officer, and our chief financial officer. He had just finished a big gig and was out just consulting as a consulting CFO, and so we worked with him for probably a year, and just to sort of. We didn't really need a full-time one at the time. And so we were, it was good for all of us. And then we just realized, hey, this is working out great. And then he came in as an employee. And then another one, our COO actually came through an acquisition, but he was only on for the transition at the beginning because his role wasn't in the new company. But then so he went away for 6 months, and then he actually came back, and we had meanwhile had to fire somebody in that position, and then he filled it, and it's been great. So the try before you buy, like for a decent amount of time, 1 or 2 or 3 years, it has worked the best for us out of all those different types of things. But I think you're hiring somebody who has a lot of experience for a lot of money. You should expect everything from them.
Karen, can you do that with a position like this? I mean, the people who have these skills are in such high demand right now.
For a CTO position?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. There's loads of people who are out there doing contract work because it is in such high demand. And so, finding that fit is not super easy either, but at least there's less heartache, less expenses when you can just say this is a 6-month contract. And then you try it and then you're done. And then there's no commitment. You don't have to fire anybody. There's no big, cultural downfall after they leave. If you're really trying to find the best fit, that's kind of, in my opinion, the only way to do it. When somebody's at that high level in the company, they really have a big impact.
So I completely disagree with you, Karen.
Good.
100%.
I'm just telling you what's worked well for us. So I'm not.
And I can't. Okay. Well, then let me edit the comment. I don't disagree that that's your experience. I don't think it's repeatable for everybody. In fact, I'd say more often than not, it's not repeatable. Particularly in this sector. It's the hottest sector there is right now. I mean, the supply demand of people who are out there that can do the work versus people who are realizing they need this kind of work done is there's just a huge gap. And the people who are good at it know it. And so the ones who do contract labor don't want to chain themselves to one company because they can move and float around. And in my experience, the people who have decided that the gig economy and the contract labor way is their way, they do great work, but they make horrible permanent employees. I think that, in my experience, this is why I started our business, to try and reduce the heartache. Do
you think that's just this field in particular, William? Like it's the
no, I think it's all things. Hiring is a venture into the unknown. People don't really think that way unless you point it out. But I've never had anybody disagree with me. When you add a new person to your team, you're taking a great gamble. Even if you know them personally, and adding a person changes the equation, right?
It's an arranged marriage, right? I mean,
right. So when you think about a venture into the unknown, like what is the most primal human fear? It's the unknown. You get a 3-year-old. What do they want at night? Can you leave a light on in the hall? I don't like the unknown. As a pastor in my previous career, I buried a lot of people, and even the ones that were solid in their faith were scared of death because it's the unknown. And, when you're going into hiring, whether you realize it or not, you're venturing into the unknown. So the human propensity is always to look for some known entity during this venture. And that turns into my friend told me about a guy that'd be great, or I used a contract person for a little while and they'd be awesome. And there's, whether people realize it or not, having something that you quote know mitigates this innate fear that's in hiring and this venture into the unknown. And I think a whole lot of times you just need a third set of eyes. You need some professional opinion. You need someone that can turn on a light for you. And I think that goes across all sectors. Now, within the job market, I don't know a sector that's hurting more, except maybe like chief nursing officers. There's a staggering need for that, and not a great supply chain coming. And but this sort of role that your husband's played is the supply demand's just way off. You've got to have somebody help you. The real question, Laura, the hard question, love you, but if you ask me to do the search, I say, I'm going to have to sit down with you and your husband for a long time and visit before I decide whether or not I'll do the search.
I am so aware of that.
Why is that, William? What do you want to know?
Well, so just imagine a superstar singer, a woman who seems to keep dating and breaking up and writing songs about how awful the boyfriend was, and they keep getting with the wrong guy, and eventually you got to go, maybe it's not the guy.
100%. Absolutely 100%. And that's why I'm like a little paralyzed. I don't know if paralyzed is the right word. But
well, and Laura, just to put a finer point on it, so people think I'm not just the crabby guy on the call today, it has nothing to do with you as a person. It has to do with founder syndrome. And can founders really let go? And that's a very real question to ask. Everyone says they can, and a staggering percentage cannot. And we've just learned to ask some real careful questions. And we've told some folks, I just don't think we're the best fit for you.
That's a really, really great point. And it's been very interesting and illuminating or educational, I guess, for me, because Doug and I, if you look at this, when we started, let's say we had 3 people, after when he started full time, we probably had 2 employees or something like that. And I have grown my team to 80 people. He has grown his team to 2 people. And so I have watched myself go through this founder syndrome, think I'm letting go, but I realize that 5 years ago, I wasn't letting go. Because now I have let go in some areas and I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like. Okay, maybe they're not doing it the way that I would have done it if I did it. And I'm constantly checking myself on that. And so now I'm able to kind of watch him and see where he is and is not letting things go. And so 100%, absolutely, like totally agree. And that's this cage that we're in. What the hell do you do? Like the only thing, if he dies, we get a couple $1,000,000 and I'm like, maybe then I can pay somebody $1,000,000 a year. And even if they don't want to do it forever.
This podcast just became evidence.
Yeah. Well, but what's the out? Like what are our options? Do I believe that there is one person in the U.S. or maybe 2 or 3 that would like to live in Tahoe and would like to build a team and would like to work, that all of these things kind of come together? Sure. There's one or two, there might be 2 people in the whole country.
Why do you say that? I have a hard time believing that. It seems to me like under the right circumstances, going to work for a growing company in an attractive area, having the opportunity to, build your own thing and take charge. That seems like an interesting challenge that you ought to be able to find more than 1 or 2 people interested in taking on. Am I wrong about that?
Maybe.
Karen? William?
No, I agree with you. I think it sounds good. I'll do it.
Great. Maybe. I mean, I just think about, Google's down the street and Facebook's down the street. And, we're kind of sandwiched between San Francisco and Portland and Seattle. And like, I get the lifestyle of maybe living, in Tahoe and being able and having some freedom. But, and I had always thought, maybe if you've got a couple small kids and you want to slow down and you want to like have more of a lifestyle job, as opposed to going and working for one of these big things.
What
but
about
it's not
a young whippersnapper out of college? She's super smart, but doesn't have the high salary and the high experience. Is that a bad idea, William, Laura?
We would love that. But how do you find somebody like that doesn't go to San Francisco, and then that's just a couple miles away?
Also, isn't that person going to be a little ways away from really being able to take over from Doug? I mean, what's his timeline?
Maybe. I mean, if he found somebody smart enough, again, we did have somebody, he did find somebody who was just in college, just started computer science, and she was a genius, and they communicated really well. It worked really well. She just didn't want to work for a yarn company, for the rest of her life.
Can you use that? Just go hire that. Like, I always like it when I get a persona around the kind of person we're trying to find.
Yes, so and that's what we did.
And what if your expectation is not, it's a lifelong commitment, but it's more of a 2 and 3 year commitment?
Totally. And we hired 2 of them in December, and one of them is still with us. One of them didn't work out. It didn't know as much, wasn't quite as, didn't have the level that we had expected. He's very much into, I will teach you. And just finding somebody who is intelligent and is curious. So we've tried that a few times.
William, getting back to your thoughts about whether this is a search you would be willing to take on, I'm curious if you have any suggestions for how Laura and Doug would think about what's gone wrong in the past, why they've been through so many people, and what they need to do differently to put themselves in a position to hire the right person.
This is so armchair quarterback, which is dangerous stuff. I don't know the situation, and there are no cookie cutter answers for high level hiring. There just aren't. You're talking about extremely talented people that have founded a company and done amazing work. You're talking about a growing organization that's changing every day, and you're talking about trying to find a unicorn. And Laura's right. I mean, the geographic piece is not a small piece in the puzzle. So I don't want to come off as, here are the 6 easy steps to solving Laura's problem, because they're not. I think you're asking the right questions, Laura. And the questions that I'm impressed with is, what does he want to do? Is he ready to let go? If you haven't read The Founder's Syndrome, you should get a copy of it and read it. So, okay, and then just take a long look in the mirror. And then Laura and I, I'm going to sound like all I have is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. But I think they need to hire an executive search firm, not a placement firm, not a headhunter, a high level. Go ahead and invest the money. If you told Doug, for this dollar figure, we can solve this problem for good, I don't think you'd blink. So now finding the right firm is what I think you need to be really careful about, because there's no barrier for entry into search. You just hang a shingle and say, I do search. And it could be snake oil salesman. It could be the best in the world. So I tried to equip Laura with some questions to ask as she's looking at firms that specialize in tech.
What are those questions? What kinds of questions?
What's your fee structure? If it sounds too good to be true, it is. If it sounds expensive, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Is it, you only have to pay me when I find your person? Oh, that sounds good. Most of the economy works on a pay upon delivery, transaction. But what you want in this search is a partner who is interested in making sure this gets solved, not a competitor. So if it's, you only have to pay me when I find your guy or your gal or whatever, what happens when you, Laura, run across a great 21 Hats listener who says, I'd like to be considered, and you put the name that you found in front of your search consultant? I don't care how good they are. The human heart is a deceiver above all things. I will fool myself. If it's me and I only get paid if I find your person and you bring me somebody that I did not find, I'm going to have a bias against them. I can't not. I mean, no one's that objective. So I'd say it needs to be a retained fee. And I think they need to guarantee their work. Our guarantee would be, this person's going to be here 12 months. And if they're not, we'll come back and do the whole thing again for free. And there's no expiration date on that. Like the second time, do it again. Third time, do it again. And that needs to be no questions asked. We do it if the person dies. We do it if they decide they don't want to be there anymore, or if you fire them or whatever. And if they have that kind of guarantee, then they're serious about their work. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but they're serious about their work.
How does that strike you, Laura?
That sounds amazing. I mean, it does. And that's William, I like the way that you put it that, okay, if we could solve this problem by investing, whatever that dollar value is, would we solve it? So, yeah, I mean, that reframes it.
How important is it that they're actually in Tahoe, Reno versus just coming, occasionally and working remotely? Because that may help also, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think that it's critical. I think that, maybe 5 years ago we thought it was.
Or 5 months ago?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't think it's critical. And, the other thing that we haven't even talked about is maybe this isn't the right solution. Maybe the solution is that we need to and we did try this a couple years ago, but maybe we just need to go to a new platform. Maybe we need to move everything to Shopify and then hire a firm that can manage our site.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that's going up a level, and right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are very happy with Shopify.
Yeah, I mean, we use it on the Madeline Tosh side, and then we have a staff that can kind of manage the site themselves. But you run into, Doug's issue with that, or his concern, I guess, is, we've got 19 years of rankings and pages, and, the system that he built is pretty phenomenal. It's very intricate and very, very good and very specific to what we're doing. Is that a competitive advantage of ours? And it is in some ways. If we had the people to manage it, it's a competitive advantage. It's not a competitive advantage in that, we're beholden to basically one person to manage it all.
A key question there is whether you can preserve the SEO value you've developed over 19 years when you move to a new platform. And I would think it would be fairly easy to get an answer to that question.
And I think the answer, my understanding, and it may be different, but the last time we talked about it, the answer is no.
Wow.
So that's very risky.
That's a big cost.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a cage. What do you do? We've lost money the last few years. So we didn't even have the money to be able to afford somebody for $200,000 a year, or a recruiter or whatever. So we've made some adjustments, and now we should be able to do that, which changes things, but it's a little scary. What if you hire somebody like super huge and all of a sudden everything tanks?
So I'm getting the sense we're not going to solve this problem today.
Damn it.
I think it may be something we come back to. We tried, Laura.
No, it's really helpful.
I'd like to pick up on something that Karen raised, which is the issue of working remotely. Karen, how are you thinking about that these days? How's it working with Blink?
Yeah, I mean, I know what I think, which is different than a lot of our employees, apparently.
How so?
I think we're all going to come back to the offices in some capacity. So the heads down work will happen at home a lot more than before, which I think is great, for me included. But then we'll come to the offices for collaboration, for client meetings. And then in our business is a little bit unique in that we have physical research labs in our actual offices. So these are places where end users come in and they test hardware and software, and we observe them, and then we do analysis and come up with recommendations for how our clients can improve the product or the service. So that requires actual physical space.
I want to hear about the part where you and your employees look at this differently.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. So so we've been spending a lot of time and energy, and now in actual real money, hiring consultants to come up with ideas to make the space map to what I just described. But what's come up at the same time recently is employees wanting, I don't need to be in this really expensive city anymore to do my job. I can go be in Hawaii for, months on end, or I can go, to Reno or to the middle of, some remote place and still do my work as long as I have an internet connection. And so I think what that's done is it's allowed people to see the world differently, which I think is really cool. But what they're doing now is asking us, like, hey, I'm thinking about going home to Minnesota. And I know we don't have an office there, but we've proven that we can all work remotely. Can I move? And, my answer immediately is no, we don't have an office there, so we can't support you. You can go to any of the states where we have offices, and there's 4 of them, which I think is fabulous to offer that to an employee. At least when we first started doing that, it was a real benefit.
They just have to move to the same state? It doesn't matter if they're in the same city?
Well, they need to be connected to an office. This is my view of it. So in San Francisco, for example, a lot of people in the last recent months have moved out of the city. They can still come in, but it'll be a much longer commute. And so as long as they're willing to come in a couple of days a week or as needed, then it's fine. They can spend less time in the office. That's okay. But now we're getting people requesting to move to not only different cities where we have offices, but different states. And in one case, a different country. And I have like a list of about 30 problems with that. The reason why it should be considered is there's 2 on my list, which is, star employees who have busted it and done excellent work for years, who are really dedicated. Those people are hard to find, as we've just talked about. And so we don't want to lose them. But the cons are so extreme and it goes all the way through to things like, okay, so if we let somebody live in a state where we don't have an office, then we have to set up a whole new filing system. So we've got to do, business license, we've got to have state taxes, city taxes, unemployment. We have to learn new HR regulations. We have to learn new business regulations in those states, in those cities, unemployment insurance to pay we have to set up a policy in that state. There's filings for, quarterly, annual taxes, state taxes, city, it goes on. And the problem with it is it's just a constant flurry of paperwork that needs to be, read, figured out when it's happening, and then dealt with. And I kind of think, okay, well, this is a product of success in that if our employees think that we're so big that we can handle this no problem, that's kind of good. But at the same time, we're really not big enough to manage that level of complexity in our finance side. Larger companies have a whole team dedicated to handling this multi-state employment thing. And so we just don't have that. So we have like one person who deals with the 4 states that we're in currently, and that's a lot of work. And, it sort of comes down to that while that's a nice idea, we're just not that big of a company at this stage. So maybe in the future.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever asked anybody, okay, how much of a pay cut are you willing to take if you wanted to move to Minnesota?
Yeah.
The cost of living is 37% less. So are you willing to take a 37% pay cut?
No, I hadn't even thought of that. Good one. I'll add that to my list.
Number 31.
Yeah.
Karen, where's your head? Are you thinking of drawing a line in the sand on this one?
Well, I already have. And then I'm continually getting pushback. Like I had a meeting with my executives. We made a decision which was loosening it a little bit, which is to say, okay, so as long it's not ideal, but if it's a star employee, X amount of tenure, and we don't want to lose them, as long as they're in a state where we're already doing business, so we don't have to do any of that long list, then we can consider it. And so that was a change already, because for us, we can't go virtual. We have to have these physical spaces because of our research labs. Clients love coming to our offices. They are beautiful. We have spent boatloads of money making them a cultural attraction. And so I don't want to run a virtual company. I'm just not interested in doing that at this stage in my career. And the problem is our neighbors, the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Microsofts, Twitter's just said never have to come back. Microsoft, not for a year. Facebook, you don't ever have to come. So we're up against that.
William, have you seen this kind of issue either at your place or with clients?
Everywhere. And I have run a virtual company. I've run a completely on-site, must live here, work here, show up here company. And now I run something in between. And part of that is COVID, but will probably be some form of hybrid going forward. I think that Karen's hitting on such a good point. The kind of work that a company is doing sort of sets the standard for how much of it has to be done under the same roof. I'd love to see Ford Motor Company put a car together with virtual offices.
Exactly.
It isn't not going to happen, right? But, we use basically a bank of virtual receptionists, and you're assigned a team of 5 or 6 that learn enough about your business to be able to navigate incoming calls and make us sound like we have this full-time receptionist sitting at the desk all the time without having to pay for it. That can totally be done virtually. It's completely virtual work. And by the way, if you're interviewing people that are going to be completely virtual, you can do the interviewing virtually. But if you're going to have them under your roof, you better get face-to-face with them before you hire them.
Have you dealt with people who want to live in different states or different countries?
Yes.
And how have you responded?
I haven't dealt with the country piece yet for my business, right? But people that want to live in different places. I have a relative who's a partner at a very well thought of management consulting firm. And years ago, she told me, we advise our clients to leave 10% of your workforce available for living wherever, because you will find every now and then the person who is just amazing but cannot move. And for us, one of those was a guy who had started a church, grown it to a really nice size in El Dorado Hills, not too far from you, Laura. He was ready to step away from that, but had a lot of gas left in the tank. And all of his grandchildren lived on the block he lived on. He was not leaving there. Like, that was not an option. But he was good enough and exactly what we needed at the time enough that we said, okay, that works. So I'm learning to steer away from all the categorical imperatives of always and must and never and go a little more case by case. It does come with a cost, though, and it's exactly what Karen said. I mean, he was an employee in the state of California, and that's a whole different host of issues and taxes than working in Texas. So I don't love it, but I'm learning that, if you're going to die on that hill, you might win the battle and lose the war.
Have you found any useful hacks for dealing with that bureaucratic piece of having people in different states?
No.
Okay.
I mean, at the time we were using Insperity, which used to be Administaff, the kind of the largest PEO company that there is. And that's supposed to be why you're paying them an upcharge, is to make that stuff go away. And it just, no, it was always a nightmare.
Karen, have you actually lost people yet over this issue?
No, not yet. But it's, we will lose them. I think that's the reality.
Interesting. But if you were a retailer, let's say, and it's just so obvious that you have to be in person, you would lose them if they left anyway, right? I mean, if somebody's going to move, they're going to move.
Good point.
So in
totally
some
agree
ways,
with you, Laura. And Karen, I don't know your business, Karen, but our central nervous system is still a show up at the office and be here and you must live in Houston. And what I've discovered for where I am right now is that central nervous system is way more productive if they're in the same building. And maybe I'll lose a person here or there, but the productivity I gain by keeping people together outweighs the loss of the one person.
Yeah, I mean, and for us, it's the collaborative nature of it, coming together and brainstorming. And
totally.
the clients want to come and be with us. I'm like, yeah, we can make an exception, but then all of a sudden the exception becomes the rule, and then everybody wants to do it, and why did that person get to and not me? And that's what I'm afraid of.
Well, that's exhausting.
Because I don't want to have ghost town. I mean, we have a problem already in that our offices are too big for the reality of the future, which is people in the office less often. So we have to grow quickly to fill those offices, because there's a cultural shift when you have an empty office. It's bad for the culture. If it's full and buzzing, that's good. You get energy from that. So I'm already worried about that part of it. And then they're also wildly expensive to have these offices. And so we need them full of billing people. And so, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to work in the office. So like, why don't we close the office? But then then our whole business blows up. So it's complicated.
So that's two problems that we haven't solved today. I'd like to try for one more in the little bit of time we have left. I got a question for you guys, and that is this. What do you do personally when your to-do list just seems endless? You have that feeling that you could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you still wouldn't finish the list. The days fly by. And especially during the pandemic, if you're working from home, it's hard to know when to turn it off. It's hard to stop. It just keeps going. I'm asking for a friend. Can anybody relate to this?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I'll tell you what my experience has been this last year, and it's that I work 24/7. And I know that the list, although it feels like it's endless, it's not. So I'm actually in a period right now for the first time in about probably 16 months where I can breathe, and I'm taking walks with the dogs.
How'd you get there? What changed?
I worked 24/7 until the work was done.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
I built the house, and now the house, now we can stand under it and the rain is off of us and I can take a little bit of a break. There's still lots of stuff to do, but none of it is as urgent as it was. And I just had to get through it.
Karen and William, I suspect you're at different places in the evolution of your businesses, but have there been times in the past when you felt that way?
How about all of the last 12 months? Lauren, back when we partnered together at Forbes, I think one of the most popular columns I ever wrote was, there is no work-life balance. For me, it's been a myth. I'm just going to turn it off at 5. And I got a pastor friend who's like, I just don't take any calls after 4 p.m. That is sacred time. And if the number one donor in our church called me at 4:01, I wouldn't return the call. Well, the dirty little secret nobody knows is he is the number one donor in the church, so he's not going to call himself. But I think most of us is just praying for wisdom to know when you have to get things done and when you don't. Because there are seasons where you're in the middle of building a house and a rainstorm's coming and you better get the roof on. Yeah. I mean, you got to get it done. It's just got to happen. And then you got to have the discernment to know when to shut it off.
Yep.
And for me, a lot of what I'm trying to learn lately is the proactive rather than the reactive. And you start business, it's all proactive, and then it gets busy and it's all reactive, and business is coming in, we got to deal with it. I'm moving to a little different stage, as you mentioned in the question, Lauren. I can't remember, one of you probably knows, management consulting was basically born by a guy giving business advice to a great bank, and he told the owner of the bank, you and your management team write down 6 things you want to accomplish this day that will help the business move forward. Just 6, no more, no less. And just mark those off the list and do it every workday and watch what happens. And it is amazing what that small discipline will do. If I'll, before anything else, either at the end of the day today for tomorrow or at the very beginning of tomorrow before I see my phone, if I'll do that exercise, I find that I have a better handle on my proactive throttle of when to turn it off and on.
Well, first off, when you said you're a different phase in your business than Laura, like as if it's all gone away, it's always the same. There's always more to do than you have time to do. Particularly, we all have kids, so you're a parent, and then you've got in my case, 130 extra kids in the company. It feels like. So it never ends. But so for me, there's 3 main buckets, which is constantly prioritizing and reprioritizing, like every day. My job is to be constantly evaluating those priorities and what's at the top. And it's always changing. And that's the fluidity of the business. And so at work, I do that. But in my life as well, it's just constantly like, okay, what is at the top? Where will there be repercussions if it doesn't get done? Which leads to outsourcing. So I try to offload and outsource anything possible. And so that is a real shift to get to that stage. And I know that for small business owners, they have a really hard time with this in the business. And so you need to start doing it in the business and then apply it to your whole life. So I'm always asking myself and the people who are reporting to me is what can somebody else do and what's the best use of your time. So make sure that I make sure whatever I'm doing that only I can do. And if I think somebody else can do it, maybe not the way I would, but that's okay. It can still get done. And you don't think about it as dumping your crap on somebody else. You have to think about it as empowering others to take on new responsibilities. And it may be something that they are really good at, like wired for it. They're super efficient and they love it. Versus me, I'm not wired for it. I hate the level of detail, like email, for example. It kills me. And so if somebody else can do that for me and actually enjoy it and get satisfaction and feel responsibility for doing that, and I can pay them for it, then I can go free up my time to do the heavy lifting that only I can do in terms of running the company. That's a good solution for everybody, but it takes a really long time to get to the point where you're willing to hand stuff off. And then I have, I added this new thing just recently that's been working great with working at home, because it's hard to know when the day ends, because there's not people leaving to clue me in like, oh, it's the end of the day, people are leaving. And that kind of is a trigger for me. And I don't get that. And so I put a calendar, a hold on my calendar for Monday to Friday that says, stop working, start dinner, and like get out of the office. And it's actually helped because I have an hour reminder. So I'm like, okay, I've got 1 hour left. I'm going to go.
Well, I'd really like to keep talking with you guys, but I got this to-do list that I got to get to right now. As always, my thanks to Karen Clark-Cole, William Vanderblumen, and Laura Zander. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.